there's a place on the map where three different nightmares overlap. For China, it's the fear of losing control of what it calls its core interest. For Taiwan, it's the fear of being cut off and strangled before help can arrive. For Japan and the United States, it's the fear that one small misstep will drag them into a war they can't easily stop. That place isn't marked with a big red X. It's a thin band of water between Taiwan and the southern islands of Japan. And beneath that water, something else. Silence. The silence of submarines. What you're about to hear is a dramatized reconstruction inspired by real naval patrol patterns, open-source reporting, and the way both sides already operate in this region. It's not classified, it's not a leak. But it is a realistic picture of what happens when one Chinese warship crosses a line everyone pretends doesn't exist, and a US submarine decides to answer. Our story begins above the surface. It's late evening. On Taiwan, the lights of Taipei glow along the river. People scroll through their phones on crowded metro trains. And the news runs yet another story about Chinese aircraft crossing the island's air defense identification zone. For many civilians, it's background noise now. Fighters up, fighters back, missiles in the propaganda videos, statements, protests, denials. But out at sea in the dark band of water between Taiwan and Japan's Yaeyama and Miyako Islands, nothing is background. Every contact is a potential fuse. On the bridge of a Taiwanese patrol vessel, a small crew keeps watch under dim lights. Their radar isn't as powerful as a big destroyer's, their ship isn't as large, but their mission is simple and brutal. Stay alive long enough to report what's coming. Tonight, their screens show a familiar pattern. Chinese warships, moving in loose formation to the north of Taiwan. Usually they turn back or swing wide, threading through the open ocean in a way that lets Beijing say, "We're just training, this is normal." But one symbol is off. A single Chinese destroyer is slightly separated from the others, its course trimmed in just enough to slide closer to the gap between Taiwan and the Japanese island chain. Closer and closer. The Taiwanese watch officer leans in. "Tamen yu dian chi guai," he mutters. "They're acting a bit strange." He double-checks the bearing. No, it's not an illusion. The Chinese ship is drifting toward a line that never appears on official charts, but everyone in the region knows it by instinct. The line where a move against Taiwan stops being pressure and starts looking like the opening page of a blockade. He sends a contact report to his higher headquarters. Within minutes, that report gets bounced, encrypted, and repackaged across multiple networks. It doesn't just land in Taipei, it lands in Japan, and it lands in Hawaii, and beyond. On a US Navy destroyer further east, an operations officer reads the update and whistles softly. Looks like one of the plan boys wants to go sightseeing. The captain glances at the display. He's not overly worried. They've seen Chinese ships move aggressively before, but he's not relaxed either. Because this time, there's something else in play. A decision made months earlier in quiet rooms in Tokyo and Washington. If China starts practicing choke points around Taiwan, the response will not only be in the air and on the surface, it will come from below. Far beneath the waves, hidden by layers of cold, dark water, a US attack submarine slides silently along a pre-planned track. The crew lives in red light and recycled air, their world reduced to steel, screens, and the faint creaks of pressure all around them. There are no windows. Their only view of the outside world is sonar, the echoes of sound bouncing off hulls and rocks and the sea floor. On the sonar display, faint at first, then clearer, the Chinese destroyer appears. A steady rhythmic noise, the specific beat of its propellers, the hum of its engines, the unique sound that experienced sonar techs can sometimes identify the way other people recognize voices. The US boat has been here for hours already, listening. Now, it has something to care about. The officer of the deck in the control room speaks quietly. Contact bearing 210 designated Sierra 3. Likely planned surface combatant. Analyzing for class. The fire control party gets to work, measuring the angle on the bow, the changing bearing, the Doppler. The submarine's computers crunch numbers, dropping out probabilities. Type 052D class destroyer. Modern. Capable. Loaded with anti-ship and anti-air missiles. A core part of China's growing blue water navy. A ship like that moving casually near Taiwan is one thing. A ship like that moving toward a narrow gap where it could help cut Taiwan off from Japan and the US Pacific forces is another. The submarine's captain walks into control, coffee mug in hand, the same way he does every day. But when he sees the plot, he sets the mug down without taking a sip. He stares at the line representing the Chinese ship's projected course. Looks like they're pushing it, he says. The executive officer nods. Intelligence thinks they've been rehearsing blockade moves. Maybe tonight they want to see how far they can go before someone pushes back. The captain considers. He's been given rules of engagement that stress caution. No surprises, no weapons unless attacked. No contact for contact's sake. But he's also been given something else. Authority to send a message from below the surface without firing a shot. Bring us to battle stations modified, he orders. No weapons ready, just sensors. I want every detail we can get on that contact. The boat quietly snaps to a higher state of readiness. Compartments lock down. Extra people load into control and sonar. The atmosphere tightens. Back on the surface, the Chinese destroyer sails on, unaware of the predator tracking it in silence. Or at least, mostly unaware, because Chinese planners are not stupid. They know that for every visible patrol aircraft or Japanese destroyer they see, there may be a submarine they don't. They just don't know where or how close. On the Chinese bridge, the captain stares at his own radar and navigational chart. His mission is written in bland language. Training patrol, familiarization with waters near the strategic channel between Taiwan and Japan. Freedom of navigation in waters China considers its rightful domain of influence. Unofficially, everyone on his ship knows what this is. It's a probe. If a crisis over Taiwan were to erupt, China would likely try to isolate the island quickly, physically and psychologically. Planes, ships, missiles, cyber attacks, the works. To isolate it from help, they'd need to control or at least threaten the routes from Japan and from the wider Pacific. What he is doing tonight is testing how much of that route he can step into without the other side doing something dramatic. He adjusts his course by a few more degrees, sliding closer to the imaginary line where Taiwanese and Japanese patrol routes overlap. On the American submarine, the sonar operator hears the change before anyone else sees it. Con sonar. Sierra 3 altering course slightly to port. New course, 240 relative. Speed still around 20 knots. To a casual observer, that's nothing. To a submarine captain, it's a message. Closing the gap, he murmurs. He calls for a detailed maneuvering board solution. The team projects the Chinese ship's future positions, the risk areas, the possible intentions. He doesn't want a collision. He doesn't want a sonic near miss that could be misinterpreted as an attack. What he wants is to let the Chinese captain know he is not alone down here. There's a way to do that without actually showing yourself. The US submarine adjusts course and depth, sliding into a position off the destroyer's beam, but at a range and depth that keep them tactically safe. They begin to paint a picture of the Chinese ship so detailed it borders on intimate. Revolutions per minute, shaft noise, even the wobble of the prop, tiny imperfections that make this hull unique. If war ever breaks out, this data will make it easier to track and, if necessary, kill that ship. But tonight is not about killing. It's about signaling. On the Chinese destroyer, something odd happens. Their sonar techs, listening more out of habit than expectation, begin to pick up faint sounds that don't belong to their own ship or to known merchant traffic. Not loud enough to classify instantly, not close enough to trigger alarms. Just a ghost somewhere in the water. The Chinese captain is briefed. There may be a submarine in the area, Comrade Captain. We can't be certain. It could be distant. It could be behind a layer. China has its own submarines, of course, but this feels different. They haven't scheduled one here for this patrol. Which means it's foreign. The captain looks again at his chart, at his course, at the delicate web of politics floating above these waves. He imagines just for a second a US submarine sliding silently under his hull, within torpedo range. He imagines this exact scenario but in wartime. And suddenly the idea of pushing further into that gap between Taiwan and Japan doesn't feel quite as bold. It feels exposed. He orders his crew to increase active and passive sonar sweeps to classify any suspicious contact. He doesn't find anything he can nail down as a submarine, but the suspicion remains. And that suspicion changes behavior. On the American boat, the captain decides it's time to sharpen the message. Just a little. He orders a controlled brief speed change. A small burst that creates a distinctive acoustic signature, then a rapid return to quiet. To an experienced sonar operator on the Chinese ship, it's like hearing a whisper turn into a low growl, then vanish. Not an attack, not a collision course, not a weapon. Just a very deliberate, very professional. We're here. On the Chinese bridge, the captain gets the update. Possible submarine contact ahead and to starboard. Short duration speed change detected. Now quiet again. He knows exactly what that means. It's not normal merchant behavior. It's not accidental. Someone below the surface is doing with sound what ships do with flags. For a few minutes, he says nothing. He stares out at the dark water, knowing that somewhere, maybe 100 meters down, maybe more, there is a steel hull filled with people who are invisible to him, but who can hear every rotation of his propellers. He thinks about his orders, test the waters, demonstrate presence, avoid incidents. He's already accomplished the first two. The third one suddenly feels fragile. He calls his navigator. Plot an alternative course, slight turn away from the gap. Maintain speed, but shift us 10-15 miles off. It's not a retreat, not in the way Beijing will see it when he writes his report later. He'll phrase it as a prudent adjustment in response to suspected hostile submarine activity. He'll emphasize that they still operated freely near Taiwan, still displayed Chinese resolve. But the truth is, in the moment, what he's doing is backing away from a line he thought he could cross without consequence. The line wasn't a missile, it wasn't a fighter jet, it wasn't a destroyer blocking his path like a cop car. It was a ghost in the deep. The US submarine's crew watches the change on their tactical display. Con, sonar. Sierra 3 altering course to starboard, moving away from the constricted waters. The captain nods slowly. Message received, he says. He does not chase. The goal was never to herd the Chinese ship into some trap. It was to remind them that any move to tighten a noose around Taiwan will be watched from angles they can't see. He orders the boat back to a more conservative trail position, maintaining contact but at greater distance. The modified battle stations are relaxed, though no one truly relaxes on a submarine. In Taipei and Tokyo and American operations centers, the reports begin to flow in. Chinese destroyer pushed toward gap. Suspected US submarine presence detected. Chinese ship adjusts course away. To the public, if it ever leaks at all, it might become a small line in a long article. To planners, it's a proof of concept. The Taiwan-Japan-US triangle isn't just theory, it's alive. Taiwan spots, Japan monitors, the US listens, then and nudges. Later, War College instructors will build slides based on this kind of encounter. They'll talk about anti-access area denial. They'll talk about blockades, gray zone tactics, escalation ladders. They probably won't talk much about the human side, the Chinese captain staring at black water, feeling watched, the American submarine captain deciding exactly how loud his hello should be. But that's where the real game is played. Not in the headlines, but in the seconds when someone decides to turn 10 degrees away instead of 10 degrees toward. As dawn creeps up over the Pacific, the surface looks peaceful again. A Chinese destroyer, still on patrol, but a little farther from the gap. Japanese and Taiwanese ships still watching, but without the immediate tension of a possible choke point. Somewhere below, the US Submarine slipping away to another patrol box, its crew moving back into the strange, timeless routine of life under pressure and steel. For most people in the region, the day will feel like any other. They'll commute, drink coffee, argue online, watch short videos, and swipe through the latest news about politicians talking tough. They won't know there was a night when one Chinese warship stepped just a little too close to a line everyone pretends isn't there, and a submarine they never saw quietly pushed it back. No missiles, no explosions, no screaming headlines, just a message written in sonar and steel. We see you. We know what you're rehearsing. And if you ever try it for real, then you won't be alone out here, even in the darkest water.